Friends, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk a little bit more in depth about molds and air drying clay and how to use them. So this video is probably going to be more suited for beginners or somebody that hasn't really worked with clay all that much. However, if you are experienced with clay as well, maybe you will learn something new anyways from my video. So today I just kind of wanted to show you the general gist of how to work with molds. As you can see, I have quite a few of them. That's not all of the ones that I have quite a few more. And then here I just wanted to show you, so this is Das air drying clay. So this is my preferred air drying clay that I usually will use. It's quite heavy compared to this super light one, for example. For most of my projects this works just fine. So this is kind of my go-to product to use with molds. So this stuff comes in two colors. You can get either white or terracotta. I personally prefer white. It's just more pleasing to the eye, the way that it looks when you apply it, rather than terracotta, at least for me. So if I can get the white one, I will get the white one, but the terracotta one is exactly the same. And for the most part, you're probably going to paint over it anyway, so it doesn't really matter what color it is. And then, so this is at the moment my clay of choice for when I need something that is extra light. So for example, if I was going to make some Christmas baubles, I'd go for this. And the reason being is that it is very cheap. So this little box costs £1 in Hobbycraft. So this is Hobbycraft's own brand air drying clay. They have it in a range of colors, as you can see. I was able to get light blue. They didn't have any white, but like I said, just like with this stuff, it doesn't really matter what color it is because you're going to paint over it anyways. So as you can see, this is a brand new packet. I haven't opened it yet, but I will open it and just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like and how I work with it. There are many different brands of air drying clay out there, so I haven't tried all of them, but just to name a few, I've tried Fimo, Superlight and Basic. I also have this Hobbycraft own brand white clay, which is supposed to be an alternative to Das. It is a little bit cheaper. You can get this from Works or Hobbycraft at about £4 per kilogram, and then this one is about £3 per kilogram in Hobbycraft. However, I personally I'm not a big fan of it at all. I don't know if I just got a bit of a dodgy batch, but I really didn't like it. It's really hard. It takes a lot of work to try and soften it up a little bit. And it's not as pliable, it's a little bit more sticky than Das, so I personally wouldn't recommend this. If you have access to Das instead, then go for Das. Same with Fimo. I don't have any right now. Fimo Basic, I don't really like it because even though it is, I think, about the same price as Das, I find that Fimo is a lot more sticky, so it sticks in the mold, so you have to powder it up so that it doesn't stick. But yeah, like I said, there are many different brands out there. So what I would suggest, if you don't know where to start, just type into Google your location and air drying clay and see what comes up. See what kind of prices come up with things. For me, I will personally only buy Das if I can get to Hobbycraft or the Works or order it online from them. I wouldn't buy it from eBay or Amazon because it tends to be a lot more expensive, and we're talking, last time I looked on eBay, it's about £11 per kilogram on eBay, whereas, you know, £4 at Hobbycraft. So that's more than twice as expensive. If I can give you one piece of advice, if you've never worked with clay and molds, don't assume that you are able to learn everything that there is to learn about them without actually trying different things out. The way that you have to work with them will really depend on each different mold, so on how flexible it is, how ornate it is, how deep it is, and so on. And same with the clay. Every single clay that you try out will be slightly different. If it's a little bit sticky, you might need to try and play around with the amount of talcum powder that you add to it, and so on. So don't get discouraged if you can't get the same stuff that I have, for example. Just get yourself a mold and some kind of air drying clay and try it out. It will take a little bit of time to get used to it, to work things out, to see how every single different clay performs and so on. Even these redesigned Prima molds, they are definitely the most expensive molds that I have. These are like They cost around £16–17 per mould, so I kind of buy one a month. It's like my special treat, or have been trying to. Even they are like probably the best quality molds that I have, and still, as you can see, they are different depths. Depending on what kind of mold it is, you will see that it can be a little bit more difficult to get clay out of it. It can be very easy. So for example, this one here, as you can see, it's very, very thin. This border is very thin, and you can see it on the other side. When I bend it like that, you can see the line very clearly. Whereas for example, let's show you this one here. It's not as deep, and so as you can see, when I bend it, it doesn't even bend in that place. It bends in the place of this one, the wider mold. So and again, depending on how fine the details are, it might be easier to take clay out, it might be harder. So for example, out of these bits, it's quite easy to take the clay out of these bits, but all of these little bows, I have not been able to successfully get clay out without actually breaking it, because of like how ornate they are. So as you can see here, for example, the strings of the bows, they are very shallow here on this part, but then there's like a really big dip inside. Hopefully you can see it. And then it goes really, really shallow, and I find that that's like a real big problem with trying to get wet clay out of it. And again, for these kind of things, you might want to experiment with things like resin or super light clay or something like that. So let's get started. So I'm probably gonna show you on like one of these molds. So we're gonna start with Das. So I just take a little bit out. In terms of storage, I personally use clay quite a lot, so this packet of clay isn't going to sit out for that long until it's gone, really. So I just kind of roll it up and then close it with that sealer thing, but you can definitely put it into another plastic bag, and that'll keep it moist for longer. Rip a piece of clay off and then kind of squeeze it in your hands, warm it up. You need to get it pliable, you need to get it nice and soft to where you can work with it nice and easy. If your clay is a little bit harder than what I have here, then a good idea might be to get a rolling pin. I personally have a rolling pin that is specifically dedicated to clay. This is the only rolling pin in my house. As you can see, I know where my priorities lie. So, and you can take your rolling pin and then kind of roll it out into like a flat pancake, and then fold it up, roll it out again, and do that a few times, and that really helps to soften the clay up. Then another little tip when you're working with air drying clay, so of course it's in the name, it is air drying, so if you leave it out for a long time, all of the moisture will evaporate and you won't be able to really work with it. So what you can do is take a little bit of either paper tissue or one of these cloth tissues that I have, wet it in some water like this, and then take whatever you need to take to work with your mold, or however much you think you might need, and then the rest you can just roll it up, and that'll keep it workable for longer. I do it when I have the patience for it, but most of the time I just kind of let it sit. So do as I say, not as I do. And then also, if you do happen to leave it out, just wet your fingers a little bit in water and then just kind of wet your clay a little bit. And again, squish it all around, roll it, make it into a sausage, then make it into a ball again, and do all of that. And then that kind of just puts a little bit of moisture back into the clay, makes it very soft and pliable. Right, so in terms of how to put it inside of the mold, that will really depend on what kind of shape you're working with. So for example, with these kind of stringy bits, what you can do is make it into a little sausage like that, and then just squeeze it in really, really well so that it goes into all of the creases and crevices. And then take a palette knife. If you don't have a palette knife, you could use one of these, or even just a plastic card or a butter knife, something like that. You'll find, if you don't have one of them specifically dedicated for it, then you know, you can find things around your house to use instead, and just cut it off and then slide across with your finger just to smooth it out a little bit. If you find that you've cut a bit more off than what you intended, so sometimes if you press too hard, you can like dip it in and you'll notice that you've cut a little bit more off so that it's not very even. You can just take a little piece off like that and then squeeze it in, tap it in till you can see that, you know, it's clearly adhered to the rest of it. And then to take it out, so I just kind of hold it like this, and I push it with my finger from the back and take it with the other hand and gently pull it out. Oops, ripped a piece off. So you have to be very gentle with these. Another thing that you can do if you don't have a palette knife, and some people just prefer to work this way, so you take a little bit of clay, make it into, again, roll it out into a sausage, and then just kind of work it into the mold with your fingers, and you will get better with time. So it took me a little while to get used to doing this, but now that I've done it quite a few times, I find this can be easier and quicker depending on the size of the mold and the shape. This can sometimes be a quicker way to get the mold in. So you just kind of work it in with your fingers like that, and then you don't have to cut anything off. The softer your clay is, the easier it will be to do this, and then just kind of using your finger, you can just kind of drag the clay across and take any of the excess off. But again, it will depend on how soft your clay is. I even find, you know, with DAS, as much as I love it, depending on the batch that you get, it might be a little bit harder, it might be a little bit softer, so you never know what you're gonna get. And then again, sometimes if you're struggling to get a mold out and you find that it ripped like it did for me just now, what I also like to do is turn it over and then kind of do this and let the gravity help you. So you kind of roll it off backwards. And I find with difficult shaped molds, like especially like this one can be a real pain to actually put in and then take out. So I find with this one, when I have to take it out, rolling it off is much easier as well. So there you go. You just take it out like that. With difficult molds like this one, for example, like this bow, I have not been able to successfully take it out yet without actually like putting the clay in and then letting it dry and then taking it out. But even then, these very shallow bits can be so fragile that like when you're taking it out, it just breaks off. So you never know when you get a mold. It's not an exact science. You're just gonna have to kind of learn as you go, and as you learn more about molds, as you get more of them, and as you experiment with different molds, you will learn what works best for you, what works best for the type of clay and materials that you have access to. So yeah, just once again, don't get discouraged. So hopefully you get the sense. So with this one, for example, this mold, so also like these parts here on the ends, they are very, very shallow, so it's really hard to cut them off like that with a palette knife. So as soon as I go with a palette knife, the whole thing just drags away. So I find just like squeezing it out, or like even if I just put it in like this, like the whole big thing, and then cut a part of it off like that, and then you just have to kind of work it in with your fingers, and then again use your fingers to get the clay away from the edges where there's too much, and so on. So So it just takes a little bit of practice. And then I just wanted to show you a quick example of this super light clay. As you can see, when you first take it out of the packet, so this is a brand new packet. I actually bought it quite a few months ago, haven't used it yet, but so as you can see, it's still very, very tacky, it's still very wet, and so texture wise it feels like, it doesn't help that my fingers are still covered in dust, but I can't go and wash my hands right now because I'm all mic'd up here, and I don't want to disrupt it all. You'll notice that when you first take it out, take the whole thing out and just kind of work it again, work it in your hands. And I know this sounds gross, all of the like kind of natural oils from your hands and all of that are gonna make it a lot less sticky, and then the longer you leave it out kind of in the air, the less tacky it's going to become. So if I was to put it in the mold right now, I won't be able to take it out, or most likely I won't be able to take it out of the mold successfully. However, let's try. Yeah, so see, it's very tacky. So I'm trying to take it out, and it's like chewing gum. So texture wise, that's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of like chewing gum, but even like stickier. It sticks to your hands and everything. So what you can do, so if you don't need to make a mold right away, or you have some time to prepare, take it out of the packet and just kind of spread it out like that and leave it to dry for about an hour before you start to use it in a mold. However, if you need it quite urgently, quite quickly, and I had to do this before Christmas, I had this custom order of these baubles that I had to get done really quickly because they were going to America, and like the last posting dates were like were like coming up. So I had this custom order that I had to do, and I actually used Fimo's Super Light for about half of them, and then I run out and I didn't have the time to go and get more Fimo, so I just had to use this clay. I had one night to get all of them molds up on the baubles, and so I didn't have the time to sit around and wait for it to become less tacky. So what I did is I'm not going to do that now because I would like to keep this clay kind of usable for when I need it. I don't want to waste it away. But what I did is I kind of kept working it in my hands like this, and then I take a little bit of baby powder or talcum powder and sprinkle it inside, then kind of fold it all up and work it up, and then do that again. Take a little bit off, try it in the mold. If it comes away easily, that's fine, then I can work with it. If it doesn't come away easily, then I keep adding talcum powder and I kept adding talcum powder until I was able to put the clay into the mold and take it out without it actually sticking to the mold itself. So in general, if you're struggling with the tackiness of clay, talcum powder is going to be your best friend for that. In terms of what kind of glue you should use for molds, for clay, if you're gluing down wet clay, I personally use PVA. I hold it in this little jar because I have like a really big tub, like a 10-litre tub in my cupboard. So I just put a little bit into this jar, and then once I've used it up, I top it up. This is trade grade PVA, so this is Carpenter's wood glue. It's very important. This is not normal PVA, school glue. This is Carpenter's glue. So I would personally recommend using trade grade glue when you're gluing down molds, because it's very strong and it's going to make sure that your molds don't come away. So if, for example, you're making a box like I've got here, when you go like that, it doesn't come away because it's like really, really strong. Normal PVA, decoupage glue, Mod Podge, things like that are not going to be strong enough. If you had to leave your clay in the mold to dry, so you can't take it out while it's wet, or you don't need to, or any reason like that. If you're using dry clay, you can use any strong glue that you have lying around. So anything that's kind of liquidy and tacky will do. So PVA, super glue, hard as nails type glues, anything like that will do. So I think we're gonna end here, really. I think I've covered most of the things that I think any beginner kind of runs into. But of course, if you have any questions, anything like that, leave those in the comments below for me, or feel free to send me a message on my Facebook page or on my Instagram page. Links for those are going to be in the description, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Yeah, so I hope that this has been helpful for you. And yeah, so like I said, just don't be afraid of molds and clay. They are very fun. They can really take your decoupage, mixed media, whatever it is that you do, game to the next level. One last piece of advice is, if you do get a new mold or a new clay, I would really recommend just take a little piece of that clay, put it into your mold, and then try taking it out. If it doesn't come out, leave it, come back to it in an hour, see if you can take it out in an hour. If it still doesn't come out, leave it until it's fully dry. When it's fully dry, then you can see, is it still bendable or is it completely firm? How fragile it is. You can do all of that. Just don't be afraid to experiment when you get a new mold. Oh, one thing that I wanted to also mention is that this clay, the super light clay by Hobbycraft, is bendable after it's fully dry. It's not like completely bendable like the hard as nails mold that I did in the last video. But it's still going to be bendable, so you will be able to put it around like a jar or something like that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Like I said, any questions, suggestions, anything like that, leave those in the comments down below. Do you want to make sure that you don't miss any future ones? Then subscribe to my channel. Links for everything are going to be in the description, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!